Do not turn away from good deeds. Do not abandon those you've tamed. I've never had pets. My mom was always against having pets. Perhaps because of this prohibition, I always had special feelings for any animal. I'll feed a stray dog with a sausage on the street, or buy a packet of soft food for a courtyard cat, and it warms my soul. And this November, I befriended a titmouse. I saw a yellow-bellied bird outside my window in my room and decided to set up a hotel for her. I poured a handful of wheat groats on the windowsill. Maybe she'll come back. And she did. She pecked, and I watched. So, every day, I started adding more grains. I didn't see any other birds outside my window, so I quickly got attached to my titmouse. She wasn't afraid of me, as if she knew who was leaving food for her. This friendship with the bird became a little joy in my everyday life. I don't get along well with people. It's easy for me to make acquaintances, but for some reason, I don't want to maintain friendships. I don't know what to talk about, or I simply forget to communicate. Sometimes, I wondered if I would become one of those eccentrics who go to feed pigeons in the park in old age. But these thoughts didn't sadden me. Is it really necessary to establish friendships with people if you feel closer to animals? With my feathered pet, the late autumn mood seemed less gloomy. Waiting for the titmouse to land on the window, I would contemplate the view outside for a long time. The blue and silvery palette of trees, clouds, and buildings created a special atmosphere of tranquility. And here comes my bird to peck a few grains. A smile spread across my face. My mom disrupted our idyll. "I want to brag that I tamed a titmouse," I said. "Do you not know that if titmice peck at the window, it's a sign of a serious misfortune?" my mom replied. "She hasn't pecked once," I retorted. "And don't be so superstitious." "Do you want my death?" she asked. I knew that arguing with my mother after these words was not a good idea, so I just sighed heavily and replied, "No, Mom." "Then stop your feeding. I don't want to see anything on the windowsills anymore," she scolded. My mom brought me a broom and made me sweep the wheat off the window while she watched. My mother has always been strict with me. Maybe that's why it's so hard for me to connect with people. Suddenly, they might turn out to be just as harsh. Now, with the titmouse coming, my heart aches. The bird got used to receiving food, and now I was forbidden to treat her. I tried not to look out the window. I felt like a traitor. One day, the titmouse tapped the frame with its beak. I told myself it was a coincidence. These birds have tiny brains. She probably didn't think about getting my attention that way. I only believed in my mother's superstitions at an early age, and I outgrew them long ago. But it was after the first tap of the titmouse on the window that misfortune entered our home. I don't know why it happened. Whether my mother was right in her superstitions, or I made a mistake by refusing my good deed. I'll never solve this mystery. My mother is an owl. Her activity starts late in the evening, so she loved going to the 24-hour hypermarket near our house and often returned when I was already asleep. That evening, I dreamed that the titmouse was tapping on the window. The yellow-bellied bird was 3 times larger, and its eyes seemed evil, with red glints in them. She pecked at the frame, and I woke up from the noise. There was no one outside the window, just the blue darkness and the lights of neighboring houses. But the tapping was real, only it wasn't on the window, but on the door. Sleepy and weak, I went to open it. Besides my mom, no one could come so late. only one thing confused me. Why didn't she try to shout through the door? Her nerves would have given up on impatience long ago. So, before opening, I looked through the peephole and made sure it was her. My mom held a large brown bag in her hand. Her nose and cheeks were red from the cold. I thought she was going to scold me for not opening for so long, so I prepared to defend myself. Opening the door, I gasped. What I saw through the peephole differed from what stood at the threshold. It wasn't my mom. I don't know who or what it was. It wasn't clear. A man or a woman. Someone old with gray, dirty hair, bulging eyes, a long, sharp nose, and a smile like an old, torn boot with protruding nails instead of teeth. My guest was dressed in worn-out clothes, hanging in shreds. No beggar would wear such a shabby outfit. Torn cassock, a scarf on the shoulders just as ragged. The torn fabric resembled protruding feathers. I tried to close the door, but Sharpnose didn't let me. He grabbed the door. His hand was horrible. Black dirt under long nails, dry and dark skin with sores and cracks. I imagined how much infection this person could carry and stepped back. Sharpnose pushed the door away, and I saw him in full height. He seemed to have stepped out of the pages of old books with scary tales. He held the other hand clenched in a fist and pointed at it with his eyes. I stopped feeling the boundaries of my body out of fear. I forgot everything and didn't try to drive away the vile guest. Sharpnose raised his hand over the threshold and opened his fist. Wheat grains spilled onto the floor. He smiled and squinted his eyes. I was not so much scared as discouraged by what was happening and felt disgust. The stranger on my doorstep looked scarier than the devil, but seemed to take pride in it, contorting his face to look even uglier. Pouring cereal on the floor, Sharpnose walked away. I closed the door. There was no time to think about what had happened. I understood that I needed to clean up before my mom came. If she had found the long-nosed one on the doorstep instead of me, it would have been a disaster. My mom was very responsive to everything, and she would have blamed me for everything, saying that I had brought misfortune into the house. She better not know what happened. I carefully cleaned everything with a vacuum cleaner, then decided to calm down by drinking something hot. I, for some reason, felt cold, even though all the windows in the apartment were closed. I poured boiling water over a tea bag. Steam rose from the cup, warming my face. I felt much better. Soon my mom came. She opened the door with her key and almost immediately called me. "Yura, come here, please." From her tone, I understood that the conversation would not be pleasant. "What's this, huh?" She noticed a thin strip of wheat near the baseboard. "Taking cereal again?" "I didn't take anything," I mumbled. My mom started her usual nagging. "Do you know that scattered cereal is also a bad omen? It's for family discord and impoverishment. Clean it up quickly and don't dare to rummage in the shelves again." I felt unfairly scolded. I could barely contain myself from telling about Sharpnose. But who was he? A question without an answer. I have no options. But magic couldn't be avoided here. After all, I saw my mom instead of Sharpnose through the peephole. I used to enjoy staying home alone. It was a time of freedom. But now, when my mom started getting ready to go somewhere, I felt nervous. Every few days, she went grocery shopping at the hypermarket. She didn't take me with her. She said I wasted money on all sorts of sweet and harmful nonsense. She remembered me as a child. She left late at night. I lay there and couldn't sleep. I could hear my heart beating under the blanket. It was quiet in the apartment. My titmouse hadn't visited or tapped on the window for a long time. Of course, birds wouldn't disappear in winter. They'd find a place to feed. But I felt ashamed for upsetting the little bird. It's not worth fixating on such trivial matters. There was a knock on the door. Again, like last time. I had no intention of repeating the story. Knock, waiting, knock again. What if I'm mistaken? What if it's really my mom who forgot her keys? Yes, she would have called my phone. Good idea. I called her. Hello, she answered. Hey, where are you? I asked. I'm leaving the store. Why? Oh, nothing. Just asking, I replied. I hung up. There was knocking on the door. With each knock, it got louder and louder. But it didn't last forever. I waited for it to stop. It was quiet in the apartment again. Only my heart was knocking. About 20 minutes passed, but I didn't feel any calmer. I was afraid. What if Sharp Nose was still standing behind the door, waiting? I got up from the bed, dressed in casual clothes, and went for reconnaissance. There was no one through the peephole, an empty landing. But I felt that things were not that simple. So, I slightly opened the door and looked at the doormat, just as I thought. There were scattered grains of wheat, yellow seeds stuck in the fibers of the mat, scattered on the tiles. It needed to be cleaned up before my mom returned. I wanted to hide what was happening from her. I thought it would be better that way. I shook the shoe mat over the toilet, then rinsed it in the shower. I returned to the landing with a broom and quickly swept the remnants of yellow grains into the dustpan. Done. I had already entered the apartment and absent-mindedly looked at the stairs above. He stood there, not moving, not breathing, so as not to be noticed too early. A bunch of eyes and a vagabond, a nose as long as a needle, blue veins on his forehead under dirty skin. I choked on my own saliva and coughed, but didn't want to show weakness and scolded him. Why are you coming to me? Get out of here. The vagabond stretched his lips and squinted. I closed myself in the apartment. Fear pounded against my ribs, against my temples. An unpleasant, tickling sensation in my stomach. A feeling of helplessness. All because of that titmouse? Then forget about my mom's prohibitions. Better deal with her than with real evil. I took some cereal from the closet and sprinkled it outside the window. If the bird comes, let it feast. While I was feeding her, no one knocked on our door. The frost bit. The ground was sparsely covered with snow. I wore a down jacket, a hat, and 2 thick sweaters, but I was so cold that I couldn't talk. I wanted to get home quickly and warm up. I had to wait for the elevator for a long time, fumble with the key with frozen fingers, and the torture ended. I finally entered the apartment and dropped my backpack. Mom appeared from the kitchen. She was cheerfully busy, a rare mood. "Oh, you're back. How are you?" she asked. "Yes, usual," I mumbled with frozen lips. "Usual, usual. Everything is usual with you," my mom nagged. "Say hello to Aunt Marina." So that's where this bustle came from. Her friend from work came, with whom they gossiped about all colleagues. It's for a long time. I peeked into the kitchen. Aunt Marina, hell. The words got stuck in my throat. My breath caught. It wasn't my mom's friend. Sitting in our kitchen was the bulging-eyed, sharp-nose, the vagabond. He sprawled on a chair, laying his dirty hands on the table. The stench, like from a dumpster. Mom flew past and sat opposite this monster. She didn't notice who was sitting at our kitchen table. I shifted from foot to foot, and something crackled under the soles of my boots. Wheat. It was strewn all over the floor. Pinch me to wake me up. Such things don't happen in real life. Under Sharpnose, there was an untouched cup of tea. He looked at me. Mom sipped tea, cheerfully telling something, waving her hands. It seemed like she was sure her friend was sitting in front of her. How surreal it was. Mom looked at me and said, "Why are you always making faces? Eat, go to your room." "I don't have an appetite. Don't feel like it," I replied. Sharpnose squinted even more and smiled even wider. Wrinkles on his face twisted like a snake. I lost it. Or my mom lost it. How to figure it out. I went to my room, but stood at the door and listened to my mom talking to herself. And I also talked to him. "Why do you need this car?" "You have one. You better do repairs in the apartment." He lives in such conditions. "Don't say, Marina, I'm talking about the same thing." She thought she was being answered, but Sharpnose remained silent. Why did he come to our home at all and bring darkness to my mother? Does he want to mock me? Guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't leave my mom alone with whoever it was. I returned to the kitchen and said that I needed something. Mom followed me and asked, "What do you need?" I leaned towards her ear. "Mom, this is not Aunt Marina. Can't you see? It's not her. Yura, go rest. Don't disgrace me. Making up stories again." Mom nudged me in the shoulder and went back to her guest. All I could do was wait, wondering how it would all end. Would Sharpnose leave, or would he stay with us until nightfall? Snow was swirling outside. The untouched grains of wheat I left for the titmouse were now covered in an icy crust. I don't know what deed brought curses to our home, but there was no turning back. "Goodbye, Marina," Mom's voice echoed in the hallway. I peeked out of my room and was horrified. She was hugging that sharp-nosed creature, and he was almost laughing, peering over her shoulder. If he had touched me, I would have immediately set my clothes on fire, then soaked in the bath for a long time. The stench from him permeated the entire apartment. Mom closed the door behind the vile guest and went to her room. I spent the whole evening cleaning the kitchen, wiping the table and chairs, sweeping every grain of wheat. All I could do was hope that Sharpnose would be satisfied with this visit and wouldn't come back. He had rattled my nerves enough. What had actually happened? Maybe I recently fed not a bird, but an impending disaster. I appeased some dark force, only to later reject my kindness. And now the trouble had returned to my home to finally unfold. I knew something bad would happen. On weekends, Mom always woke up late, but that Saturday, she slept almost until evening. I woke her up because I started to worry. She looked unhealthy, but she tried to act normal. It was time to stock up on groceries. Mom was buttoning her coat and complaining. "I feel bad, weakness all day." "So rest," I replied. "Where are you going?" "When do I rest? There's plenty of work, and I won't get any help from you." No matter how hard I tried to convince her to let me handle the grocery shopping, Mom wouldn't agree. She couldn't trust me with that task, and she went to the hypermarket herself. She'll come again, knocking on the door, I thought. It was expected. Only when the mother crosses the threshold do they knock on the door. I looked out of the window. Snowflakes were slowly floating in the air. Not a single person on the street, as if the whole city were empty. And only I could hear that knocking. Sooner or later, it would all stop. He wouldn't enter if I didn't open for him. Let him knock until his fist hurts. Sharp-Nose just needed my reaction. Fear. Any emotion. He wouldn't get any more of that. Knock on the door. Why don't the neighbors complain about this noise? Don't they hear it? I looked out the window. Frosted grains of wheat, snow, factory chimneys, a white house. Knock on the door. He wouldn't enter if I didn't open for him. And suddenly, the phone rang. An unknown number. I usually don't answer calls from unknown contacts, but this time, I picked up the phone. Hello? Is this Yuri? An unfamiliar woman spoke to me. This is the city hospital. Your mom asked us to call. She felt unwell in the store, and she was brought to us. Her condition is unstable. She regains consciousness and loses it again. What? The phone trembled in my hand. I was shaking all over. Don't worry. She's under the care of doctors in the intensive care unit. No, this would end badly. Mom would die if nothing were done. I could feel it. But what to do? What? Knock on the door. I have to face trouble, try to negotiate. I went to the door, shook my trembling hands, took a deep breath, and opened it. Sharp-Nose took a step towards the threshold, raised his hand above the corridor floor, and opened his fist. Yellow grains showered down, the cursed wheat. I thought, would you just fall through with him? But instead, I put on a guilty face and whispered in desperation, what do I do to end this? What should I do? Sharp-Nose squinted, opened his mouth, and asked for only one word.
Eat.
I didn't expect this, but I had no choice. My mom was dying in the hospital, and in such situations, you endure any humiliation. I slowly dropped to my knees, leaned toward the floor, picked up a few grains with my lips, and started chewing. Sand crunched between my teeth, and the wheat turned out to be bitter. I looked up. Sharp-Nose was watching me from above. My humiliation wasn't enough for him, so I scooped up the wheat into a small pile, bowed again, and continued eating. I pecked at it like a little bird. The next time I raised my head, Sharp-Nose was gone. He left. It was over. My mom felt better at night. She came to her senses. Soon, she was discharged from the hospital, returning as lively as she was before. Everything was fine for her, but not for me. In the evenings, when she isn't home, Sharp-Nose knocks on my door. I always open it. He scatters grains on the floor, and I kneel and eat, all to prevent another disaster. Friends, as always, I invite you to discuss this story in the comments. What do you think? Who is this Sharp-Nose monster? Is his appearance related to the superstitions of the main character's mother? Share your theories in the comments. Reading them is always very interesting.